are gold and blue. Born in 1872, the greatest team in the world, we are known. As we follow on, we are the people through and through, the gold and blue since.
Good morning, good afternoon all. Hope we're all enjoying as the start to the weekend. It is Friday morning here. My name is Chris. Welcome to Bold and Blue 1872. I am again joined by my friend Jack. Jack, how's things?
Not bad. Hello everyone who is tuning in. Yeah, as you said, start to the weekend and could be shaping up to be an interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we're all kind of waited. We're all tenderhooks at the moment, just waiting for a press release, an official statement. But it's been an interesting week. It's I suppose that's what happens when the Rangers job becomes available. It's always interesting, and it's like I mentioned the other day. There, it's the debates that you're having with people about who should be the next Rangers manager is always interesting. But yeah, I mean, I touched on there. It's been an interesting week. So let's just since we last spoke on, was it Monday we spoke last, Jack? Was it? Yeah, I think it was. Yeah. So since we last spoke, there has been a couple of developments. So we did have the open letter statement, if you want, whatever you want to call it. Marath and Kavanagh essentially coming out and holding their hands up and saying we've got this wrong, taking a lot of accountability, which I think was absolutely the best approach from those guys, considering they were starting to come under quite a lot of scrutiny themselves with some of the appointments that they've made. I found it quite interesting that they held their hands up, but not only that there was maybe an indication there that they were not overly convinced that Stewart and Felwell had overseen the appointments as well as they could have been, and kind of insinuated that they were going to look after the appointments a lot more closely this time. I do have some question marks over why that never happened in the first place, but ultimately it was a positive letter from our leadership. I mean, I don't know what you thought of it, Jack, but yeah.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, just the fact that there's that kind of form of accountability. Like, I think everyone can kind of buy into that and go, do you know what? Like, it's like anything else. You hold your hands up, you say, we made a mistake. And from that point, people can kind of move forward because, they're not trying to be like, get round it or, kind of pass responsibility, etc. Whatever way you want to look at it. I do find it interesting you're talking about the fact that they're paying more attention to the recruitment process, particularly as it's been kind of widely reported that it's obviously themselves that are taking this week down, having the talks, etc. So yeah, I think it's a good starting point for kind of rebuilding. That. I don't want to say trust. I wouldn't say people have lost trust in them, but just obviously on the back of the Russell Martin appointment, and the way things are going. So it's a good kind of drawing a line under it, I suppose, and then looking forward. Yeah. So yeah, I was really, really positive to see it.
Yeah, I thought it was positive. I will say, like, talk is cheap, right? Like these are businessmen. They're probably well accustomed to releasing statements that are engineered to detract from some of the negativity that they're possibly receiving at the moment. So, but in saying that, credit where it's due, they didn't have to do that, right? I mean, I'll give a prime example. The other side of Glasgow right now, look at some of the statements that their board has been releasing. So, credit where it's due, but like I said, talk is cheap. They need to get it right this time, and making a mistake one time around is one thing, but fool me twice, that's a different story. So let's see. But there's been some other news. The managerial appointment is obviously what's on everyone's minds, and we're going to get to, obviously the title of this video is circulating around Steven Gerrard, because it's becoming fairly evident that he is the front runner for the position at the moment. But some of the stuff I'm seeing out there at the moment, so Jermaine Defoe seems to just be as subtle as I don't know, a bull in a china shop, is posting stuff on Instagram, indicating that he is potentially him and Steven Gerrard are potentially on the way. So he's posting stuffs like Rangers training talks with 55 on it. I don't know if it was like a flask or a champagne. It was a flask, wasn't it? Kind of thing, with 55 on it. You know, posting pictures of him in a shirt and tie and stuff as if he's on his way to an interview or something like that. You know, it's not very subtle from Mr. Defoe, but yeah, I found it quite funny and quite interesting. He's got everyone talking. So yeah, thoughts on the news this week. I think that Danny Rowe. I think that the Review had reported a couple of days ago that Danny Rowe. So Steven Gerrard was not the only person that was being spoken to, and Danny Rowe was also being spoken to. I think we covered in our last video. I think we both agree that's a more concerning appointment than Stevie G would be. It doesn't appear there's any other names in the equation at the moment. Sean Dyche came out and said that he's not interested in it. So he basically took himself out of the equation. I've heard rumours about Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. And then I noticed yesterday that Stephen Robinson had went up to 2-1 in the odds as well. I don't know where that one came from. But yeah, what do you make of the talk this week in terms of potential appointments?
Yeah, just very briefly to go back to Mr. Defoe, it has been rather amusing, shall we say, and I don't think I've ever been on his Instagram so much as I have over the last kind of 24, 48 hours, so it can keep going with it because it is amusing. And yeah, just on the kind of wider news, I mean, the official line, I think, was that there's more than one name in the running for this job, and we've heard all kind of sorts of names mentioned, but it's kind of like everything else. There's always just speculation. You don't know what you're hearing's right or what you're hearing's wrong, and then it's like we're all just kind of waiting for some kind of like outcome. The Stephen Robinson one, it is slightly strange in terms of how he, kind of made his way up in terms of like the betting odds as such. But I mean, this is me not jumping and going and get Stephen Robinson, but I can kind of see the logic in it in terms of, a guy who knows the league, etc. But still a rather strange one considering the Stevie G train seems to have well and truly left the station at the minute.
Yeah, I mean, there was some other rumours as well. I think the Edinburgh News had reported that McInnes had basically taken himself out of the equation as well. Don't think there was any recognition that he was even being spoken to be quite honest, which surprised me. But he kind of took himself out of the equation if what the Edinburgh News is reporting is accurate. Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious at the moment that there's a front runner here. By the time we get this video out, yeah, that announcement might already have been made. Who knows? But let's talk about Stevie G, okay? So I think from our last video, Jack, we established you were leaning towards Stevie G, but you were open to the conversation on other appointments, right? Me personally, my preference was Derek McInnes, and I'll explain more as we go on why that was. But I was skeptical about Stevie G. So I thought it would be interesting today because I've seen a lot of back and forth between fans about is Stevie G the right man for the job. I think there's an argument on both sides as to why he is and why he isn't. So I contacted Jack a couple of days ago. I was like, why don't we have a debate about this? Can you change my mind? Can I change your mind? I mentioned recently that the debating people when it comes to this kind of thing is almost a waste of time. It's like fighting a losing battle. A lot of people have already made up their minds, and trying to change that is quite hard. So I think to be clear, I'm personally not wanting to change anyone's mind today, but I think it's a good conversation to have about what the pros and cons of Stevie G coming back is. So, but yeah, so let's kick it off. I'll start with you, Jack. Stevie G,
Fantastic.
pre-Rangers and Rangers. What's your kind of holistic view of that period?
So from our conversation the other day, I'd kind of indicated that as a candidate, he gets it. So if we're going back, to before he came to Rangers originally, he was this, household name. He had this almost charisma. He could get respect from the players, and I can't really think of any other managerial announcement where I've seen people flock to Ibrox so quickly, and it just seemed to be like a superstar had arrived, and it was almost like we were buying into Steven Gerrard, the footballer, and the name, and not really paying attention maybe to the managerial. Well, see, no lack of managerial record at that point, because I think it was only the kind of academy or junior coaching he'd done at Liverpool. So obviously with him coming in, obviously there was loads of building, changing the squad around. But ultimately the way I look at it is that he took Rangers to their most important league title in recent history, and yes, we can look at cup records and I'm sure you will bring them into the equation in terms of like what that they were. So I won't go into them too much, but I mean, just for me, it's he understands the magnitude of it. I think, and as I said, having been here before, like he just gets it. That's the way I view it. And yeah, okay, the way he left, I don't think a lot of people were happy. And I would be honest and say I was one of them. I was a bit like, can't really believe he's went and done it. But moving away after Rangers, obviously went to Villa. He was there for just under a year, if I'm right in saying so. I think it was a 14th place finish, because he joined kind of mid-season, took over from Dean Smith, which was actually three places worse off in the season before that. And then obviously, I think it was like 12 games they went on without winning. And then obviously,
yeah, let's get to post Rangers after. Let's because I think there's a lot to talk about with the period that he spent at Rangers, and then there's that secondary part of his career that I think is a talking point on its own. But in terms of like you mentioned the 55 title, right? I'm on record. I don't know if many people have seen this, but I was on Four Lads in the members area where I did a kind of sat down with Davey and as a fan sat and talked about my experience as a Rangers fan, and I think it's called Firsts and Memory. I can't remember. It's somebody. Anyone that's seen it would know what I'm talking about, but. I mentioned on that my and I think this kind of surprised Davey. I said that 55 was for me my most memorable title win. So I before I start getting into why I'm skeptical about Stevie G, first and foremost, I want to say that without a doubt I recognise the importance of 55. I probably was pissed for about 3 or 4 days after 55. Partied way too much, and my reasons for that are quite simple. From where we were, what we had to go through, getting back to that point, being number one in Scotland, it was a monumental effort to actually achieve that. So I will certainly not detract from that single achievement, because it was probably one of the, like I said, most monumental achievements in our history, and like I said, it was probably my most, even though the fans weren't there, my most memorable. Maybe there's recency bias there as well, right? But my most memorable title win. But yeah, so let me get into this in more detail, right? I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I don't want to jump ahead, Jack. My apologies. My issues. I think that this. I mean, there's a lot of talk about one trophy out of nine potential trophies, right? And that's fine, but I think there's context to that as well, right? So the first season, I'm not even going to talk about it. I think it was a write-off, in my opinion. I think that, and Stevie G was entitled to that first season in terms of, the squad that he took over was appalling, absolutely appalling. I mean, there was no way Walter Smith couldn't have even got a tune out of that team, right? So I think that the first season is a bit of a write-off for me. But there is some results in there that are kind of telling, right? Some of the League Cup, Scottish Cup results. Aberdeen basically had their number that year, if you recall. He'd brought in a number of players. It's not as if he was like he didn't get investment. There was a bunch of players. I'm going to go through the players over the course of the 3 seasons in a moment. But the first season, bit of a write-off in terms of title ambitions. But certainly, I was disappointed with the League Cup and Scottish Cup. I think we went out in both cups. It was either the quarters or the semis in both of them. I think it was the quarters. In both the Aberdeen, which was even more painful, right? Was it Derek McInnes in charge of them as well at the point in time?
I think it would have been, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, my man Derek McInnes, his record over Stevie G is pretty impressive, actually. But then we go into his second season, and this is where, for me, I think that you can give more credence to the expectations that Stevie G he'd brought in a bunch of players in his first season. His second season, he brought in a bunch of players, and again, I'm going to go through them in a moment. But his second season, for me, and through the course of the first and second seasons, I think we're starting to set higher expectations in terms of Europe and our presence in Europe. Stevie G, over the course of the first, second, and third for that matter, qualified into the UEFA Cup. We never made it into the Champions League, obviously, but we were a presence in the UEFA Cup, and if memory serves me right, it was either the second and third. It might have been the first, second, and third. I think he got us into the last 16 in Europe as well. Might have been the second and third. Anyway. So I think there's credit to be given there, but domestically in the second season, for me again, he was a mile off in the league, a mile off, not even close. And then the League Cup and Scottish Cup again. I think we get to, was it the second season we got to the final? We get beat off of Celtic. Did we go out to St Johnstone? I think it was. Or was that in the third season? I can't remember. But again, just it's like quarterfinals. It gets one final. Over the course of 3 seasons, his best effort in the cups was that final when we get beat off Celtic, right? So for me, we get into the third season. There's actually talk of Stevie G being sacked at the end of the season, the second season. I'm not sure if everyone recalls this, but there was not a lot of positivity around him. Some of the players that he's brought in, and again, I don't mean to keep saying this. I want to go through them one by one in a moment because I think it's worthwhile. Some of them were massive flops. Some of them were coming on. The third season, things just start to materialize and everything starts clicking, with the exception, again, of cups. Now, was Stevie G fixated on the task at hand, which was stopping 10 in a row, getting 55? I think there's a good argument for that. But in that third season, and this is where, like, I've kind of given him a gimme for the first season, bypass, I should say. Second season, I thought he could have done better. Third season, I think that Celtic team are there for the taking. I'm not even going to talk about the COVID impact because we were both playing with the same challenges, right? Like, I don't even know why it's an argument. People saying our players played better when there was no crowd there. Well, the same expectation was on the other side of Glasgow, so I don't even know why there's an argument there. Do I think we've got we did have a bunch of people in that team that were potentially bottle jobs? A couple of them are still there to this day, unfortunately. Yes, I do, but it doesn't matter. You can only take on what's presented in front of you. So from that perspective, I don't give any credence to the whole COVID thing whatsoever. He blew away all challenges in terms of the title for the league. But I think that there was a massive opportunity there with what was going on at the other side of Glasgow for us to do more that season. And I think that I actually think, and I'm going to piss a lot of people off by saying this, he massively underachieved in that third season. So before I get to the players, Jack, I know I've spoke a lot there. That's my concerns over his tenure at Rangers in general, but the players is a specific issue that I want to get to separately. So yeah, fire away.
Just to come back on that, so I think I would find it hard to argue with the cup record. I think, you know, because I kind of got to the point where it was disappointing, but not in the same sense. It wasn't like we're really shocked that we've been put out, but I do think I would agree. The first season, of the same opinion, it's a bit of a not a write off as such, but you understand he's just in the building. First season, etc. That's fine. The second season, yeah, the Aberdeen was disappointing. I particularly recall, I can't remember if it was either the Scottish Cup or the League Cup, but I hadn't managed to get into my seating time at Ibrox, and by the time I get in Ibrox, Aberdeen were already in the lead, and I had to walk by where the away supporters are housed, and they were banging on and I was like, oh, this is just not, so the experience of that again. But okay, you put it to the side, and then you go, right, third season, and I do have to hold my hands up and say I can't find an argument of what the reasons were why we didn't do it. I mean, yes, you can make the argument about, the title being the be all and end all. And I think, to be honest, if you'd asked most people at that time and said, take the title, forget the cups, I think most people would have went absolutely, because just on what you said, 55 is, and again, might be recency bias, but it's definitely the most memorable for me. I mean, that's including things such as like Helicopter Sunday, and yeah, it was just unbelievable. So yes, I think you can argue underachieved in terms of the cups. I think also even if he'd won one of those cups in his last season, I think there would be a slightly different narrative. People would be going, well, do you know what? He'd done the League and Cup, in his last season, etc. But the fact of the matter remains that he didn't do it across any of the seasons, and that is quite glaring. But I just go back to it, as I said, like there is not concerns, but there's skepticism there for me. But I think as a potential manager, I think he just gets it, and that for me is, a good starting point considering where we've already been this season.
Yeah.
So that I think Chris and I could go back and forth for this for quite a while.
No, I do. I think it's interesting. How much of this whole he gets it thing is about the personality of Stevie G. Let me take Russell Martin, probably the polar opposite of how fans feel about managers, right? I've said before, Russell Martin is probably the least likely kind of person that I'd like to go for a beer with, right? Stevie G is probably up there with someone that I'd really like to go for a beer with. The way that he interacted with the fans, the way that he interacted with, we've seen all the kind of backstage stuff in the dressing room. Stevie G, what do you call it, belly flopping on the floor with the beer or the champagne all over the floor, covered in booze, celebrating with the players, celebrating with the fans. Just seems like a very, relatable character to, I think, and I've mentioned this before, most football players are blue collar, and I'm not diminishing the fact that anyone can be a Rangers fan, but most diehard fans are blue collar workers, right? Is that what's resonating this more than anything, that Stevie G comes across as a kind of similar type of lad that we'd all like to go for a beer with, and someone we can relate to, and someone like Russell Martin was absolutely, and I'm absolutely not making a case that Russell Martin was hard done by. But how much of this he gets it is about the character of the individual, because I think we've just. I mean, I personally, I'd like to get your opinion on this. He underachieved in his last season. In my opinion, he underachieved. I think that they were there for the taking. I go back to what I said earlier on. Maybe it was the fixation with just winning the title, and that's fine. That was, again, like I've said, one of the most important title wins in our history. So that's fine. But did he or did he not underachieve in that season? I think that's a massive question mark.
And yeah, I think the only answer I can give to that is yes, he did. And I think there is definitely an element of he gets it that feeds into the narrative of why people want him to go there. I think for me, it's like he gets it. And I think I'm more of the opinion that he has maybe the correct backroom team in terms of, I do look at more as a figurehead manager as such. And like, I think a lot of it down to like man management, how he deals with the players and almost like how he carries himself. And I know this is really kind of small in the circumstance, but the guy will wear a suit on the touchline, which seems, in the world, really such a small point. But it's these small kind of things that fans pick up on. And Russell Martin was having a terrible time, and he was almost not berated, but he was called out for not wearing a suit by people on social media, etc. And just, I think he understands the traditions. Maybe like saying he gets it, and but I think he understands the size of the club, the magnitude of what it means to the fans. I think he's been quoted in the past as saying that he's there for the fans, not for himself. If that makes sense, he's doing it for the fans.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. I'm not sure I agree with that either. Yeah, we'll get to that. I do think that Stevie G has come from a similar city where you're in a goldfish bowl, and there's two teams there, but there's really only one team, isn't there? And the expectation on that team is massive. The history and the tradition of Liverpool, from which he's come from before, I think that probably set him very well in terms of dealing with the pressure and the expectations of what coming to a club like Rangers is, because there's very few clubs in the world that have that same pressure to win. I don't think Liverpool have the same expectation to win every single game the way that we do, but they're not that far off, right? So from that perspective, I think you could say that he gets it. I do want to talk about some of the players that he signed, right? So this will be a laugh. I've had some arguments with people before where it's like, Stevie G spent actually quite a bit of money. There was some investment. King did, in my opinion, at the time, facilitate driving the board to put some investment into the club that was sorely needed. And if we didn't get it, then we probably wouldn't have been challenging. So he did spend a bit of money, right? I mean, one of the things that I do give Stevie G credit for when he first came in was he did see the defence as a massive issue, and he did almost immediately, the first couple of players that he brought in was to address that defence. But I do want to go through. So you've got like Bassey, right? Bassey made us a lot of money. We paid nothing for him. I think we got him on a free. Was it Leicester or something like that? I can't remember. Was it? It was down someone club down south. But Glenn Kamara gets a lot of notoriety for that. 50k. Did we get what we should have got back on Kamara? No, but eventually we still got around about 5 million or something for that. For a player we spent 50k for. But there's a bunch in there as well. So I don't know if you remember Eros Grezda. Spent a bit of money on him. Kyle Lafferty came back. We had Scotty Arfield in there, who is notoriously probably one of the most likeable Rangers players that is still playing. John Flanagan, McGregor comes back. Matt Polster, the guy for the US, can't even remember him playing actually. Joe Worrell, Stevie Davis comes back, Jermaine Defoe comes in, makes an impact. Umar Sadiq, who's actually went on to do quite well since leaving Rangers. Ryan Kent, who I think we massively overpaid for, but ultimately got feck all back on him as well. With respect to Kent, he definitely had at least one standout season where he made a major impact. Lassana Koulibaly, Ovi Ajara, the Liverpool wonder kid that came up, if you recall him, Gareth McCauley, Philip Helander, who I thought was a great signing, but ultimately didn't work out very well through injury. George Edmondson, another one that's went on to do quite well down south. Joe Aribo, the three-legged horse, as we know him at this point, did really well. Greg Stewart, Jack Hasty, bombed. Jordan Jones, Brandon Barker, the notorious greatest trainer in the world. Sheye Ojo, Andy King, and Anis Haji did well for me. I thought was a lot better than most fans give him credit for. Actually, I think before Anis Haji got the injury, his standout season was he was a great player. Florian Cambieri, Kamar Roof comes in from Anderlecht for $5 million. Was already notorious for having injury issues, but if you could fix that, I could see the point in spending that kind of money on him. But Roof definitely had some high points at Rangers, but ultimately we didn't see enough of him. Cedric Itten, Scott Wright, Jack Simpson, Leon Balogun, we all love Big Leon, John McLaughlin, Calvin Bassey that I mentioned earlier on, Bogani Zunga, the South African, if you recall him. And then before he leaves, John Lundstrom, Fashion Sakala, Ofonbo, who unfortunately had a serious illness and never really played for us. Juninho Bakuna, the wonder kid again that we got down from Huddersfield. So, right, Gerrard wants to oversee recruitment, apparently, right? Or at least he wants to have the final say on it, apparently. I just went through a bunch of players. I'd say probably 30% of them worked out. What's your thoughts on that aspect of Stevie G's period at Rangers?
That was most certainly an interesting list to go through. It's been a while since I've heard some of those players mentioned, such as Bogani Zungu. Yeah, I think if I'm being really totally honest, much I try and be, I think there is a concern maybe about that kind of recruitment, how it's been and how it kind of ties into what he wants to do. It's been reported that he wants kind of that final say. And I might be an idealist here, but I am of the opinion that, both can work well in terms of, have a team who identify players and, and bring those kind of to the manager as such. And then they have the kind of final say. However, people could then make the argument, go, well, if he's signed off on these players, that maybe have been identified or however they were identified, that, he's got it wrong really as well. So, I mean, look, it's hard because you're never going to get 100% hit rate with recruitment anyway. But again, I can't go back and say, well, they all worked out and they didn't, because it's kind of there in front of me. So I would have to be honest to say it is slightly a concern, but the hope is that, that he has learned and grown, shall we say, over time.
Yeah, I hope so. I think that one of my personal biggest critiques of Stevie G was the amount of players that didn't work out. Now, in fairness to him, a lot of them came to Rangers with quite a lot of hype, right? You mentioned the South African lad there. I'm not even going to butcher his name, but we had Grezda as well. That these guys came with massive reputations from much smaller leagues. Even the American lad, Polster was it that I mentioned earlier on. They came with massive reputations from the leagues that they were coming from, and they just absolutely bombed in front of the pressures of the Ibrox stand. So, how much of it is the character of the individuals, and how can you how can you evaluate that accordingly when you're bringing them in? I don't know. Obviously, he was working with limited budgets as well, but the argument always gets thrown back at me directly whenever I've had this conversation about how much money did we sell Bassey for, which basically almost cancelled out all of the other transfer fees for all of those other players that we'd signed for, with the exceptions of maybe Kent that we overpaid for, in my opinion. But Bassey was sold after the run in the Europa League under Gio. Does Bassey go for that amount of money if we don't have that run in the Europa League? Do we have that run in the Europa League if it was if it was Stevie G instead of Gio? Who knows? But there was a lot of money that was just, on a wall. So I don't know. From that perspective, I think he certainly could have done a lot better.
If I could just jump in, Chris, I think just on that, but I think there's definitely an argument to be made around, like you said, people coming with reputations. I mean, even someone like Andy King, came from Leicester, won the title, a decent pedigree as a player. Even like you said, Eros Grezda came with a reputation. If I'm right in saying he was in the same league as maybe like a Borna Barisic, or they might be in the same team. I can't remember if they were Osijek.
I think they both were, yeah.
For everyone who can criticise Borna, but he came in, played a lot of games, got himself going. So again, you can kind of see the thinking if he's like, this player with a higher reputation in the same league. And so, I mean, as we said, but I think in terms of the overall money spent, you would have to say it's a slight worry. But the only hope is, like you said, is, the limited budgets, did it limit the type of player that he could essentially look for?
Yeah.
Having a different, setup now and a different set of owners and potentially more to play with that, might give him a better kind of caliber of player to get. As I said, I don't know. Only time would be able to tell, but I can't, fully deny that it wasn't 100% perfect.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head earlier there. But you're never going to get 100% spot on with your recruitment, right? But I don't know. I think I mentioned there 30% if it was successful. I think it should have been higher than that. Maybe the opposite end of the spectrum. It should be about 60-70% of the players you're bringing in, rather than the opposite. But right, so Stevie G wins number 55. We're all delirious. He's a god amongst men. Even myself, like I said, I was partying for a few days after that one. He could do no wrong. We go into his next season and we hit the ground running. We are top of the league. We get to, was it October or November, I think it was, and we start hearing rumours that all is not well. We did originally hear Stevie G at the end of the prior season talking about fixing the roof while the sun's out and stuff like that. So, and it did appear the recruitment that year. We bring in a couple of players like Lundstrom, for example, Fashion Sakala, and was it Bakuna? Am I saying his name right? So definitely it doesn't look as if we're fixing the roof while the sun's out when you look at those players that we brought in. There was a squad there that definitely Gerrard had got the best out of them in the 55 in terms of winning the title. But it needed more investment, and it didn't appear as if the Rangers board was giving them the support that he wanted. So from that perspective, I can understand that there might have been some concerns from Stevie G, but nonetheless, Aston Villa come calling, and Stevie G jumps to Aston Villa, breaks the hearts of many Rangers fans, and I personally, I want to talk about Saudi, but I think the Aston Villa, the jump to Aston Villa for me is where I have the most concerns about Stevie G. Yes, things maybe always not well with the board, etc. I've mentioned before, I think Stevie G's ultimate goal was to get to Liverpool and manage Liverpool. And I was personally, and I still am to this day, we were still sitting top of the league. We had European prospects in front of us, and he chose to go to a very, very average Aston Villa team with a lot of problems, albeit they had investors that were potentially willing to put a lot of money into the club. He chooses to go to Aston Villa. If he chose to go to Liverpool, I get it, right? But Aston Villa, he goes there, starts really well. His first couple of months, actually, I think they're where they'd finished the year before that. They're up about 10, 12 places. So he's going really well, and then it just all falls apart. And then there's a lot of talk about what happened in the dressing room. Stevie G maybe had higher expectations of a number of the players than they were able to facilitate, if you want to put it that way. And yeah, it just kind of falls apart very quickly at Villa, and within, I think he plays 40 games. He manages 40 games at Villa and loses his job with Villa sitting down at the bottom echelons of the Premier League. So yeah, just thoughts on that move and how it transpired.
Well, yeah, I'll just come out and say it that, like everyone else, I was pretty devastated by the fact that it happened. I think, with what happened the season before, and looking to build upon what he'd already done, and there was potential to cement a legacy, I suppose, or a greater legacy. And it was painful, if I'm honest. And like you said, if it'd been a Liverpool job, I would never begrudge him it. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Now you look at what happened down at Villa, and as you touched on there about things around expectations and what players are able to facilitate, we don't know how much of that is actually true, but if that's an issue in terms of he's holding them to a certain standard that they can't reach, then I think that's partly where his man management has to maybe manipulate that into place as such. And he's obviously came from being at Rangers where there was that expectation. It was, and he was not only just as a manager putting that on them, but the fan base put that on them. Whereas maybe at Villa, there's not that same level. So maybe that was a difficult environment for him to work in, as I suppose, because obviously you've seen recently that he's touched on that he wants to be at a club where there's expectation to win, essentially. And yeah, it was a disappointment in terms of how he left. I mean, now being one of the people who is more swayed towards the idea, is that kind of time is the greatest hero thing, and I think the way I look at it is that he's maybe thought of as a fast track way of going. I'll go from Rangers, I'll go to Villa, I'll do well here, and then that can show that I've done well in the Premier League, and that opens up the Liverpool job. That's the way I think he viewed it. But also, I do think it's fair to say that the level of investment wasn't really forthcoming for him at Rangers, in terms of, you just mentioned some of the signings that they had. So, maybe he looked at it overall and went, okay, I'm going to jump. But it still doesn't mean that it was particularly pleasant the way it happened.
Yeah, I've got a lot of respect for the challenges. That I am not a fan of a number of our former board members, some of them that are still there at the moment, some of the shareholders, the major shareholders, one in particular being the Parks. I could imagine that Stevie G was probably very disappointed with some of the support he was getting prior to that. That I think was driven a lot by King. I know there's a lot of fans that either way, some fans speak quite negatively about King, likewise the Parks positively either way. But I definitely can understand that was potentially a massive factor in his decision to leave Rangers. But I don't know. I find that we're a fan base that for the last 5 years has held it against Derek McInnes for saying no to the job, right? But for some reason, Stevie G has walked away from Rangers at a time where we were top of the league. We just won the league. There was potential for European challenges ahead that you would imagine he would have welcomed, or any good manager, any manager with ambition would have welcomed. And he walks away from it. And then last season, I know I don't want to detract, go off the rails here, but at the end of last season, his name was definitely touted as well, and he appears to have said no. So, you know, our fan base is kind of, I don't know why is there such a problem with McInnes, but Gerrard seems to get a pass for this kind of stuff. I don't know. Obviously, he's got that credit in the bank with winning 55, so maybe that's the decisive factor. But so he moves on from Aston Villa. I don't really want to talk about what happened with Villa after that. I think that there was a significant amount of investment that went into that team. I don't think it's fair to compare Gerrard to a manager and Emery that was, you know, well seasoned, very highly regarded across Europe. Certainly a vastly more experienced than Gerrard is, and got a lot of money. But he certainly settled things very quickly there. But and weeded out a number of players that Gerrard maybe probably should have weeded out. If he was more experienced, he might have done that. So I don't put too much emphasis on what Emery came in and did after Gerrard. I do, however, take massive exception to what happened next. Steven Gerrard, and this is my most significant concern about Gerrard. His ambition, how much has it been diminished from that guy that probably wanted to become Liverpool manager to within 4 years of being a coach or getting his coaching badges / becoming a manager, takes the bag, goes to Saudi. I don't even give a shit what he did in Saudi. I really don't. I've heard people saying that he increased that the team El Ettifaq, whatever you want to call them. Sorry, don't mean to be disrespectful. I think it's El Ettifaq, right? I don't even care what he did over there. My concern is that he took a bag to go there, and I have significant question marks about, and I'll get into this in more detail. What Stevie Gerrard, you said that he wants to be a manager for the people and stuff. Does going to Saudi and taking a bag, I mean, that for me is the lowest ambition possible for any manager that has commercial viability and has an opportunity to go to Saudi because of that commercial viability, and takes that opportunity rather than taking the potential other footballing opportunities that were out there that would have actually been ambitious.
Yes, I can. I don't even think I can argue that he's went, for the bag as such. If I'm being honest, I mean, there's been loads of people who've been out, obviously, to Saudi, and that is, as far as I'm concerned, that's what they're there for. So yes, you would be right to question his ambition, I suppose. I, on the other hand, I kind of get the impression. Well, just actually before I get there, obviously it was touted for the job back in the summer. I'd really like to know what the real reasons why that wasn't forthcoming, etc. What's changed his mind in the space of 130 odd days, 120 plus days. That I would be curious on, and I can't ignore that fact. However, just on the basis, obviously, loads of people have seen the podcast that he done with Rio Ferdinand, and I had a watch through it. I kind of got the impression that this was someone, because part of me was like, has he still got that fire? Has he still got that determination? I feel that maybe he doesn't want to be in this category of, field manager, went to Saudi, got the money, I'm going to come back and prove people wrong. And to be honest, that's kind of the impression I get. Again, that could be totally naive on my part, but that's what I feel when I listen to him speak. But I don't think he escapes the Saudi thing. I think he has to come back and really, he would have to really prove himself. Even if it wasn't Rangers job, I know we're talking about for the Rangers job, but no matter where he went from a football opportunity, he would really have to come in and go, I want to take the bull by the horns and show people what I can do. Because, not really particularly interested in the football aspect, but, I get the impression that it was just that I'm going to take the money, I'll go out there. And as terrible as it sounds, I get the impression it was a bit of a jolly, and there's no real serious football ambition there. However, as I said, to counter that, I do get that impression from what I've seen from him in terms of that podcast recently.
Yeah, I mean that's fair enough. I mean, I get kind of fired up whenever I hear Stevie G talking, because I remember the passion that he showed when he was here, and that interview with Rio Ferdinand. I felt the passion off of him as well, but actions speak louder than words, Jack. You know what I mean? That move to Saudi was so lacking in ambition. So it does move me on to. I mean, I've kind of led up to this. My most significant concern is Stevie G, the manager today. That it looks like we are odds-on favourite. Some bookies have even stopped taking bets at this point. Stevie G is more than likely about to become our next manager. What manager are we getting? And this is where I have concerns. Now, I mentioned before, Derek McInnes was my preferred option. And a major factor in that is, all the stuff. We can weigh them up against each other in terms of getting the Scottish League, understanding the club. They're both equal there. Clearly, Stevie G has the up on McInnes in terms of he's won something, right? Question marks around different styles. You can debate that all day long. But for me, McInnes was someone that I believe it loves the club to the extent where there's longevity there, and there's a certain amount of assurances with McInnes that, all the other stuff aside, longer term, he's not going to jump ship at the first sign of another opportunity. Now, I'm not saying that Stevie G is going to do that, but I am saying there's evidence there that he's not necessarily motivated by driving success in Scotland, right, with Rangers. It's a hard one as well. If I'm as an individual, if somebody offers me $20 million to go and work in Saudi for a job, and there's no other jobs that are offering me any opportunities, etc., I might take it as well, right? Fair enough. But at the same time, I think a man of his stature, somebody who is already, I would assume, quite wealthy, not necessarily in need of multi-million dollar contracts, even though that sounds hard to, as me, little old me, sitting here thinking about that. But at the same time, I just, what Steven Gerrard are we getting? Is he still as hungry as what he was when he first came in? Is he still eager to prove that he can be a top manager somewhere else? Or is this now a guy that's just taking a job somewhere that maybe he feels comfortable? I don't know. That this is my biggest concern about the Stevie G appointment.
Yeah, and I think just on that, I guess time will tell, and I think that's the only thing we've got. I think the concerns that people have are pretty valid, but there's that flip side. So I think if it is to be Steven Gerrard, then I think we'll soon find out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, there's only one way to find out, I suppose. So yeah, we've had the debate. I mentioned before, I don't think it's possible to change people's minds, but what do you make of what we've just covered there, Jack? If you Have you reconsidered your position that Stevie G is your favourite for the job, or I mean, where are you at based on what we've just covered there?
If I'm being entirely honest, I think I'm still somewhere on the Steven Gerrard Express, if I'm being totally honest. However, what I would say, just to touch on the Derek McInnes, I didn't really come back on that. I mean, I would have absolutely no issues with Derek McInnes becoming the Rangers manager. When he was previously meant to become the Rangers manager and it all looked signed, sealed, delivered, you know, I was pretty happy with it, you know, and it fell through or didn't happen. He didn't take it, whatever we were viewing it. But I just don't see him leaving what he's got going on at Hearts, no matter how much he loves the club. And even there was a rumour around about 500k for the compensation they would need to pay. Whether it's true or not, you know, that's what you read in the papers as such. But so Rangers probably in theory could go and get him if they wanted to. However, as I said, I don't really feel he's been talked about in the same way as, you know, someone like Steven Gerrard was, or even like Sean Dyche in terms of where he is on the list. The fabled list that they all have. So, yeah, I wouldn't have been unhappy with it. I would have been quite satisfied with it. However, I don't think it's going to happen. So, therefore, first class ticket, Steven Gerrard Express. Let's go again, as they say.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm probably going to surprise most people that are listening in here. I'm still skeptical about the appointment of Stevie G, but any managerial appointment should come with a certain amount of skepticism, right? I would have preferred Derek McInnes. I think I've made that clear. But there's massive amounts of I'm skeptic about that one as well. I mean, would Derek McInnes get scalped in Europe every opportunity? There's a high chance that might happen based on what we've seen with him when he has had the opportunity to take a team into Europe before. So, but does he get the Scottish game? I think that would be a gimme. So yeah, like I said, I might surprise a lot of people. I've done a lot of reflection on this. I did not want Stevie G at this club a few months ago. I thought it was the wrong move. But I've been reviewing or just kind of reconsidering why so many people are so fond of him, and I am one that's willing to admit that I've completely changed my mind. I've been looking back at, you know, when he left us. I still don't like the way that he left us and why he left us and who he went to. Like I said, if it was Liverpool, it would have been a different story. But he had us top of the league when he left. But we were on track probably to go and get 2 in a row. I would assume. Who knows what would have happened in Europe that season? Obviously, Gio goes on to do some miraculous things in Europe. Doesn't do too well in the league, but yeah, just looking back, watching videos, the pictures, the memories, the passion from Stevie G. And ultimately how much the fans absolutely adore him. The majority of our fans want him back. And I think that's a very good start. And that's something to build off. I think Celtic are there for the taking at the moment. And the last time they were there for the taking, Stevie G delivered. Cups aside, domestic cups aside, non-league cups. But yeah. I am willing to say that I think that maybe I've got this wrong, and I think he is probably the right appointment. You know, I've got it down here that at some point in this video I'm going to say 2.0. Let's fucking go. Stevie G, welcome back. I think it's going to be announced shortly anyway. So whether or not what we've discussed here makes any fucking difference, to be quite honest with you, I'm not sure. But I think it was an entertaining talk. But I have definitely shifted over the course, and we've got our group where we've got a lot of friends and Rangers fans in there that we talk to regularly, and yeah, I don't think that given the other options, I think it's a no-brainer that Stevie G has to come home, and I'm optimistic that he's the right appointment at this point. So, yeah. Don't know if I've surprised you with that one, Jack, but yeah, thoughts what I've just said there.
I think if I'm going to be honest, you did surprise me there. Considering you were laying the grounds for a Derek McInnes appointment. Yeah, just as you said, I think in this situation, it's the right appointment. I think I don't want to say steady's not the word, but in terms of building a bit of positivity, building a bit of unity, I think he's got that, like you said, like in terms of the Gerrard side and the persona, like I think he's got that almost ability to take people with him, if that makes sense. Like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it, and he goes and does it, domestic cups aside, as we said. But I think if he's come in, gets everyone behind him, the majority of people will be unified, and see the people who are not, if they start winning games, that's all we want, really.
Yeah, I watched the review did an interview with Kamar Roof there. Was it yesterday or the day before? And Kamar was talking about, and this kind of grabbed me as well. That Stevie G was really good, and I've worked with managers like this in the past, that they're kind of recognising the something was wrong with the player, right? If there was maybe their demeanour, maybe their aura, whatever it was, he could just sense that there wasn't something right with them, and he would grab them and take them aside and put an arm around them and say, "Is everything okay?" and just kind of check in on them. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that there's any better man manager outside of McInnes and Gerrard, and like you said earlier on, McInnes is out of the equation. So yeah, I am 100% on board the Stevie G. Let's fucking go train 2.0. Let's see what he can do. I think that again that this Celtic team are there for the taking. Hearts might pose an obstacle, but yeah, I'm with you. And a week ago I wasn't. So if there's any hope out there for anyone that is having a conversation with a fan that they might change their mind on something, then I am evidence that it is possible. Yeah, let's do it. Let's see what he's got, and hopefully we get an announcement soon.
That's it. We're all just waiting on the announcement at the minute. I think that's everyone. Phones, looking at phones and checking social media, and yeah. So yeah, that level of excitement is quite encouraging. Yeah.
Right. We've run an hour again. Honestly, I lose track of time when I'm doing these with you, Jack. I could talk all day. Thank you very much for tuning in and getting to the end there, where I've completely did a U-turn on everything that I've just covered about Stevie G. I still think there's scepticism there, but with any manager that's coming in, that's the case. But for me, and I think Jack at this point, we're both in agreement that Stevie G is the right appointment for this club, and we are looking forward for what's around the corner. Thank you very much, Jack. If you want to say your goodbyes.
Yes, thank you. And thanks for everyone for listening to me talk Steven Gerrard.
Thank you very much, all. Like and subscribe if you can. I really appreciate all the support as always. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your weekend. And again, 2.0, let's fucking go.
We are gold and blue, born in 1872, the greatest team in the world. We are known as we follow on. We are the people through and through, the gold and blue since 1872. With our hearts on fire, we rise to the call. Through the highs and lows, we'll never fall.